Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home. Welcome to Strong Dads. This is Merle Hutchinson being joined by partner Kyle Crawford. Kyle, how you doing today, brother?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. You know, I wasn't feeling too good the other day, and I'm slowly recovering. Man, my
the old age of 59 got you. Just kicked you right in the rear.
Kicked my butt. I'm telling you, it's tough to be old, right? As my grandpa always said. My grandpa said, "You can't be a sissy and be old." You know, it just you got to be tough to get old.
So where does that put you at?
An old sissy. All right, very good. So, man, we got a great show today because we are excited to bring on really a guest that I think so many of us guys can relate to, not just who he is, but who he was and his transformation. And so we are excited today to bring a broken Catholic, the broken Catholic, to our show today. We would like to welcome Joseph Warren, who is the host of the show Broken Catholic, to our show. Joseph, thank you for joining us today on Strong Dads.
Thanks, Merrill. Thanks, Kyle. Happy to be here. Let's serve some men and take them from a place of passive and powerless into a place of purpose and God's strength in their lives, yeah?
All right. Love it. That's some great stuff. So, Joseph, I know that after going through some of your material and listening to some of your shows and stuff, that you have a story, right? You have a backstory behind you. And I want to get into a lot of that because I think sometimes us men, we hear all the time in our conversations that the church has become so feminized that men just don't even walk through the doors anymore. And so instead we go through and we make our own backstory, right? Whatever it is, whether it's chasing women, alcohol, money, whatever it is, we're going to create our own world. And you've got a little bit of that in your story too, but I think yours has propelled you into a different place. And so we want to get into that. But before we get there, Kyle, you want to thank a couple of our sponsors and we'll do our deal there.
Yeah, Strong Dads, we would love to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions and Kramer's Beer House for coming alongside of us. Really do appreciate both of those. Check them out to let them know that Strong Dads sent you down there. Great facility, great places to get your decor over there at Casey's and get a good meal over at Kramer's Beer House. So thanks so much for those guys for really sponsoring us and supporting us and allowing us to keep doing what we do.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. So, Joseph, give us a little bit of your story. So here you are now. You're doing Broken Catholic. So that obviously states to something was not working well with the word broken. Give us some of your backstory that has created the position that you're in today.
Yeah, for sure. So I think a good way to start is to say I grew up with an angry dad, a Marine. And he came home from Vietnam, the war. And before he came home, he was, it was all hands on deck at the end of the Vietnam War, and that war got really ugly for America, as many veterans know. And he had to fly into enemy territory right at the end, rappel down the ropes into enemy fire to retrieve the dog tags from his fallen brothers so that he could bring home at least a piece of them to their families to remember them by. And you can imagine just the psychological warfare that was happening inside of his head, the chaos as a man, the feeling of powerlessness as he watched his brothers fall one after another dead around him, and he couldn't save them. And then the survivor's guilt of why him? Why is he the only one going home in his platoon? So that paints a picture of my dad, who's a good man, really good man, but he had a lot of rocks, a lot of head trash going on there. And he came home and he's like, I'm called to be a dad. I'm called to be a father and a good one. And I want to do it right. So he found Catholicism as his path, his spiritual journey. He was raised in a Protestant home, but it was non-practicing. Mom and dad didn't really go to church or practice. So he just kind of found his own way. And he met my mom in New York when he got back in NYC, Astoria, Queens. And she was, authentic Greek, right? Straight off the boat, and authentic like the olive oil, and they met each other, they fell in love, and he had 6 beautiful babies with her, 3 boys and 3 girls. And our home was a loving home. It was awesome for the early childhood. And we were raised with God. However, as the years passed and fatherhood took its toll on my father, and 6 kids, right, pressing on him, and disobeying and being children and testing our boundaries, right? And for all the dads out there, like your kids are good, but some of the stuff they do, not so good, right? They're figuring out who they are and who they're called to be. So my dad had that times 6. And that feeling of loss of control or powerlessness as a man, as a father, well, over time, it frustrates us and it makes us angry. And we don't know what to do with the anger. Nobody's taught us. And definitely in my dad's generation, nobody was teaching him what to do other than shut up and press it down. Mm-hmm. Don't let that out, right? Men don't cry. Men don't show feelings. Men don't show negative emotions. So that's what my dad was left with. And picture a tube of toothpaste, right? And when you apply pressure to it, you got to release the cap, and the toothpaste comes out in the right direction, out the top, and you can use it for good, right? And do what you need to do. Well, that's how we are as men. We're like a tube of toothpaste. The problem is society told us to keep the cap on, and you can't release the cap ever. Well, as life applies its pressure and squeezes on us, work stress, anxiety, depression, demands of family life, marriage, etc., financial stress, well, what happens? We just hold that cap on. And eventually, when life applies enough pressure, we burst. And the toothpaste comes out the sides, it comes out the bottom in all the wrong places and at the wrong times. And that's what happened to my dad. All that suppressed anger and frustration and loss of control from war and battle and then family life and parenting and fatherhood, it started to blow out everywhere. And he started to blow up on us children and on my wife, and his anger just became volatile. And he became a very emotionally unpredictable person to be around. So we never knew what version of dad was walking in our home every day after work. And that made for a scary place, or a emotionally unstable place for us. And then finally at age 8.5, when I was 8.5, my mom couldn't take it anymore, and she filed for divorce. And for the next 2 years, our home became a war zone, kind of like Vietnam, but emotionally and spiritually. And God wasn't there. And at least it didn't seem that way. And evil came in. And unfortunately, my mom started reading feminism books back then, but like the really nasty stuff, like men are dirt and scum, and you need to hurt them before they hurt you, and leave them before they leave you. So the enemy started to speak through my mom's lips. And my mom's a good woman, but she didn't know better. And he just tricked her, kind of like he tricked Eve in the garden, right? And then before I knew it, over these 2 years of custody battles, back then you had to pick your parent. Like what parent you're going to spend the rest of your childhood with. Very traumatic, right? They didn't understand psychology and the trauma in kids and all that. So I had to choose, right? And, I'd look at my dad and his puppy dog lips and my mom's puppy dog lips and like, pick me type thing. But then over time, over 2 years, Kyle and Meryl, like, the enemy whispered through my mom's lips into my ears repeatedly and convincingly, Joseph, your father never loved you. It was all a lie. He's been pretending your whole childhood. Pick me. And I heard this over and over and over and over again. And eventually when you hear a lie enough times, it becomes what?
Truth.
Yeah, your truth. Not the truth, but your truth. And it definitely became my truth. And immediately I felt betrayal from my dad. Like, has dad been lying to me? I don't think he has. I love my dad. Dad's Superman. But what if he is? What if mom's right? And I felt betrayal and father wounds entered into my heart. And then I thought about it, and I wasn't fully developed as a little boy. I'm 8.5, right? So I didn't understand. But I'm like, well, no, what if dad is telling the truth? Well, then mom's lying. And if mom's lying, what kind of sick person, parent, mother would ever say that to her son if she loves them? So I felt betrayal from my mother, and I got mommy wounds around my heart, and there the enemy came in, right? And I felt anger because I felt powerlessness. I couldn't stop it. One day I feel love, the other day I feel hate, and I'm surrounded by it and betrayal. So I made an unconscious decision at 8.5 years old never to love again. Never to let anyone into that part of my heart again, because I never wanted to feel that pain again. So I made this command, no one's ever going to hurt me again. And again, it was all subconscious. I wasn't developed there. But man, that painted the rest of my childhood and my adolescence. And eventually, 19 years old, I moved out on my own. And I'm like, I want my life to look different. I want to be happy, healthy, and wealthy. So I just started pursuing money and success and achievement. I want to be a successful businessman. But I had all this anger inside that had never come out. So I applied that anger to business. And turns out anger is jet fuel for men in business. You can do very well with dysfunctional anger if you apply it in one direction. The problem is it doesn't just stay in our businesses. We bring it home with us into our lives, right? And then we destroy everything we love and everyone we love. So I was a young man. We did very well within 12 months with all that jet fuel. We built a 7-figure business in 12 months, and I was a workaholic. I worked 110 hours a week. After 5 years, I burnt out. I semi-retired at the ripe old age of 24 and a half years old. And I moved to Scottsdale, Arizona. That was my sin city. That was my prodigal son experiment. And for 5 years, I moved to that foreign land, and I blew through my fortune on women and just sin, a lot of sin in the darkness. And eventually I bottomed out. The money ran out. The people ran out. The girls left me, and I was left with no one. And I finally came back to my senses for a moment. But then it was a 10, 20-year journey back to God of him pursuing me and me resisting him. And him blowing up the rocks in my head and the rocks around my heart from my childhood so that I could finally see God for who he actually is, not who I was taught he was. And the dysfunction I saw in my dad, who explosiveness, emotionally volatile, why I projected that onto God. I can't screw up around God. I have to perform well at all times or he's going to destroy me. So I didn't feel safe around God. So I left God for all those years, right? And I became agnostic and then atheist. That's the broken in the Catholic part. But eventually, God brought me back. So I'll just wrap up that part right there. Ask me anything.
Wow. Well, that's an incredible story and one that I think many of us can relate to. So my work is I came through after many years of being a school counselor, and I chose to be in an elementary school. And the reason is because I knew at the elementary level, I could still work with families. And it was only 5 or 6 years into that career that I really started to see those dads that you were talking about, your own dad, but also seeing guys like you who were like, now looking for love in all the wrong places, right? Looking for places that they can achieve, they can get esteemed. And usually it was at the expense of the family. And so here I was in the counselor role, and I'm basically trying to catch everything that's falling out from dad doing whatever dad's doing. And that's really where Kyle's heard me describe more than a few times that I started to develop an angry passion for men, but also like, where do we go off the rails here? And, like the whole idea that you start at 8.5 years of age with a divorce. And like you said, you don't really internalize that. Like, okay, so, well, this is what this is going to mean to me. But how it starts to harden your heart towards love and sacrifice and God, at that early age, you finally get to that point where you're like, well, I don't know about the rest of the world, but I got to take care of me because the
That's it.
rest of the world is crazy.
That's exactly it. That's where I became 100% self-reliant and threw God to the side, threw my family to the side. And it wasn't until years later that God had to train me up into what God dependence actually looks like. Right. And this is where so many men that I get to work with and do elite men's coaching, they're stuck in self-reliance because of the wounds from childhood and the anger that's deep in their soil. They don't know how to get it out. So they're stuck in, I got to take care of me. I'm the only one that can do this. God's going to let me down, so I can't give him all my trust. All right, I'll trust him with this area or this area, but not my money, not my finances, not my business. That's me. Right? And this is where they get stuck spiritually and they plateau. And eventually many of them, get so disappointed and discouraged, they just tap out.
Yep. Yeah. Hey, Joseph, I want to ask you, I don't want to fast forward too much into your story, but, one thing that I think a lot of men in particular, we have this perception when it comes to this God figure, right? That we have to have all of our crap together before we kind of come to him. Obviously, in telling your story, where again, I don't want to fast forward too much in your story, but speaking today, how much of your past still plays a part into what you do on a day-to-day basis? Obviously, you're talking about, being involved with other men who are dealing with the junk that goes on in life. Obviously, you still have things that you deal with. And I think it's a misconception with men that we have to have everything figured out. I mean, to date, are there still things from your past that kind of come up that you have to kind of, realize that those are, you talk about lies from Satan. Like, can you speak into that a little bit?
For sure. I want to share something very important. The story I just shared has nothing to do with me. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but the story, my testimony is not my story. This is God's story told through my life. Right? And that's very important distinction there. Because my life is meant to reflect God's compassion, God's mercy, God's forgiveness for his sons and daughters. And the before and after contrast, and we haven't got into the after, into the light, where I just shared the darkness, right? And my life is amazing right now. And I'm living what I used to think was an impossible life. And I don't say that in a pat me on the back or egoic way. I say this as boasting in my Heavenly Father, that I was so broken, I was so lost. I was almost murdered twice in Scottsdale, Arizona. One time I was being strangled to death, and I was a few breaths away from eternal damnation. And I'm being strangled, and I couldn't get free. And I didn't see no light at the end of the tunnel. I was so far into the darkness, I didn't even think about God or my upbringing. I didn't cry out for mercy or for help. I was that lost, that gone. And God, in his mercy, that's why he gets the credit. It's his story, it's not mine. God, in his mercy, he left the 99 good sheep, right? And he came and found me, the lost one in the darkness. I didn't choose him. He chose me. He came and found me. And he spared my life. And that's why the rest of my life is to glorify him, not me. It's not about me. And again, there's this thing I see so many times in men. They're like, even good Christian men that have great testimonies, they still somehow make it about them. You did nothing in your transformation other than stop resisting God. That's it. And that's where God took over. But this is where men are stuck. They're like, I don't know how to stop resisting God. They're not even conscious they're even doing it still. They're like, no, I love God. I'm like, yeah, but you're like I was once. You love God, but you don't trust him. And you got to get honest about that. You don't trust him with these areas of life that you need to control. See, I was still playing God in my own life. Even after the conversion, even after the God come and save me, I accept you as my Lord and Savior, I still was a little control freak. And there was no room for God on the throne of my life because I was already sitting there, my ego, my pride. So to fast forward, how does this relate or serve men? My past, well, men resonate with my past sinfulness and brokenness. They're like, dude, that's me. I wrestle with that. Joseph, you were a sexaholic? Yeah, I was. And for the first time in my life, I finally had an addiction. I used to look at other men with addictions as weak. I was raised by a Marine. It's in my blood. Dude, just discipline yourself. Stop. It's hurting people. It's hurting yourself. Stop. Man the F up. And that's how I used to show up in life. Just very critical of others because I had a critical dad. He loved me, but he was critical, right? It's what's so. But until I spent quiet time just sitting with God and God telling me who he actually is, not who the world told me, but actually spending time in the Father's presence and him filling in and healing all the wounds from my childhood, my daddy wounds, my mommy wounds. And I experienced him for the first time as a loving father, not a tyrant, not judge and jury ready to smash me and smite me. Man, that's when everything shifted. But see, us men, we all have those rocks that I had stuck in our head that block us in our spiritual journey with God. So men get to resonate with me and go, wow, Joseph, man, he was just like me, but I'm still stuck there. He found a way out. But I do want to say this. When you fully surrender to God, you don't have to deal with a lot of the stuff you used to deal with anymore. This isn't therapy. This isn't counseling. This isn't, okay, go ahead and book your next session with the secretary on the way out, and you got years and years and years of coping ahead of you, or learning to maintain the rocks, or manage the rocks, or cope with the rocks. No, when God heals, it's a permanent transformation. It's one and done. If you could show me one place in the Bible where Jesus healed someone and then said, okay, schedule a follow-up visit now. It doesn't exist. Yep. Because when God heals, when a man fully surrenders to God's power to heal him, it's one and done. So the work I get to do in my coaching with men, they never have to deal with these issues ever again. The alcoholism, the sex addictions, the workaholism, the anger, the inner rage, the blowing up on their wives and kids and yelling at them and then feeling guilt and shame from their past. Gone forever. That's the work I get to do because it's not my power doing it. It's not their power doing it as a client. We access God's power. So my life is that testimony. And I don't, Kyle, long answer, but sorry, bro.
No, you're good.
I don't deal with those rocks anymore. I don't deal with sexual addiction anymore, even though it was impossible in my own strength. I could not stop. I couldn't stop with the girls, man. But then God came in and his power took over when I fully surrendered that rock to him. Said, God, it's too big for me. I can't stop. I feel powerless. I need your strength. I'm weak. I need your strength here. And this is where men need to get to. You got to give God the rock that's bigger than you in your life that's crushing you. And for many men, it's the weight of your own destiny that you're carrying because you're a little control freak, just like I was. This is what the Father is waiting for you to give him.
Yeah, man. Just great stuff. I mean, there's so many things that run through my head with this because, when a lot of us guys will look at some of the different things that you went through and things that all guys, might experience at some level, whether it's the workaholic, the sexaholic, the alcoholic, the moneyaholic, whatever it is, like something that drives us. And we will try to minimize it like, at least I'm not as bad as him, or at least, I still have things maintaining. And so we kind of become that functional addict at some level. And so we start to minimize ourselves on the throne. We don't take ourselves off the throne. We just say, no, it's not really the case. And, what I've come to realize when I work with these men is, at one time, I think probably early on, I might have found a level of intimidation if I was working with a guy across from me. And even though I'm just a counselor dude, the coach guy, that, he makes 7 figures. He's a big football player. he's, he has a different persona and it really is bigger than me. And there was a level of intimidation because I'm measuring by man's standards and measuring by my insecure measuring stick. And then the longer I've worked with men over these years, like I'm not intimidated by a single man that sits across from me, especially those who really portray this big image in money or muscle, or because I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy is showing me so much of his fear.
Yeah.
And trying, so Joseph, I would ask you, like, how do we help men identify the facade they're hiding behind and why they're hiding?
Yeah.
Right. Because like, if you point me out and say, yeah, I think you just kind of hide behind something, I'm going to minimize you. I'm going to be like, no, dude, that's not really how it is. Right. That's why it took you 5+ years of being the prodigal son.
Yep.
You knew many times when you woke up with a hangover or whatever that, man, this isn't cool, but you would just minimize it and then continue it the next day. Yeah. How do we help guys see what they're hiding behind?
Well, I think for the guy who is listening right now that is in that place of extreme addiction where I once was, and it's consuming him, it's controlling him through his own early decision, right, that let that sin in. He's got to get to a breaking point, like the same way I did. He's got to bottom out the same way I did. When I was deep into the sex addiction, like, man, I had no desire to stop. And the secret for me was, I still had a conscience because of my good childhood as far as my dad instilled faith in us. Now, sure, it was mixed with all kinds of God the Father dysfunction going on there, but I still had a foundation of God's truth and right and wrong, and I thank my father and my mother for that, 100%. So because I still had that sense of right and wrong, even though I was sinning, I was still showing up in quiet time with God, feeling like a hypocrite, to be real, right? Because I'm still going and sleeping with all the girls right after. So I'm spending an hour in silence with God, and then I go sleep with the girls, right? And I know it's wrong. But I finally got to a place of, okay, this isn't working. Feeling guilt and shame constantly, chronically, perpetually is not working for me because it continues to make me feel powerless. And in that powerlessness, I want to give up. I want to quit. And the enemy's voice is louder than God's. What's the point? Stop trying, Joseph. You've given it your best. Well, you're never going to break this addiction. Look at you. You're weak. Right? The enemy whispers to us as men. And his voice is loud when we're stuck in it. But the thing I did was this. I said, God, in my quiet time, I said, God, this sex addiction, I can't stop. See, I had to admit, one, I had an addiction. Two, I had to admit I was powerless in changing myself, fixing myself, transforming myself. God, I can't do it. It's bigger than me. I accept full responsibility that I let it in. I let the darkness into my heart. And now I'm so deep in and the darkness is consuming me, I can't stop even though I know it's wrong. And I know you don't like it and it displeases you and I'm hurting your precious daughters. I get it. But then I said something very, very powerful looking back. I said, God, I don't have the desire in my heart to stop this, but I know you want me to. So I give you permission to put the desire to stop the sex addiction. You put that desire in my heart. And until you do, I'm probably going to just keep doing it. See, I had to get honest with God. Nobody wants to say that to God. Hey, I know sin is wrong, but I'm going to keep doing it because I'm that broken right now. See, God waits for his son to come and be honest with him, even if it's ugly. For the son to say, Dad, I screwed up. right? The prodigal son. Remember, the father runs to him when the son takes one step towards the dad. The father runs to him and welcomes him, open arms, and the son's immediately like, Dad, I screwed up. Just make me a slave in your house. And the father's like, son, I got you. Puts the robe, puts the ring of authority over the household. Cloaks him in worthiness, even though the son feels unworthy. See, this is where God's power shows up, but the son had to be humble first. He said, God, I screwed it all up. I can't do anything good now. I'm no good to be your son even. Just make me a slave, make me a servant. So the man listening right now, you got to get to that place. And if you're not there right now because your ego is so big and you're like, I don't even have a problem, or it's manageable, or, these other guys have bigger problems than me, that's great. That's fine. You're not ready.
Yep.
I was there. You're just at a marker in your spiritual journey. There's nothing wrong with you. You're still God's precious son. You're still loved. He's still waiting for you. But you're just in that place, okay? That's fine. Eventually, you're going to bottom out because you're on the road to destruction by the choices you're making, the same way I was. But if you're the man who's a few exits past that, and you're like, I've hit rock bottom, Joseph. Now what? Well, then go get honest with your Heavenly Father and tell him you accept. You caused your own mess. You brought the rocks into your life. Accept it. And then take radical responsibility and say, Lord, I'm willing to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes for you to come in and heal this mess I made. And I realize, Lord, that my power is not sufficient. I need your power to come in. So because of that, I surrender this thing that's bigger than me. I surrender it to you, this rock, this boulder, this crater called alcoholism, called sex addiction, called porn. I surrender it to you, Father. And then part 2, I give you permission to come in and you do the work. You put the desire in my heart that I can't find on my own right now. And I'll tell you, fast forward that story, God put a desire in me that I didn't have. And all of a sudden, I woke up one day without any effort on my own. I was still sleeping with all the girls. I woke up one day and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not even fulfilling. It's literally like I'm taking a drug and it doesn't give me the dopamine hit anymore. Like I don't even know why I'm sleeping with the next girl and then texting the next one right after. Like it's not even fulfilling anymore. I want to stop. So God put that desire to stop in. Well, that was the next part. But then there was a long road home of me now choosing to God come in, let God into my heart to do the demolition of all the rocks. And that was me just sitting with him an hour a day, every day, and just letting him go in and do heart surgery. And there was nothing for me to do other than accept and receive his love. And that's so hard for a man who doesn't know how to receive love because he was so hurt as a kid. Right? And that was me.
Yeah. And the most powerful part, that I see when guys, we joke sometimes in our office, and it's not a joking matter at all, but we see guys that come in our office and husbands and wives and stuff. And my wife and I who do the work say, man, how low is their rock bottom? Like, oh my gosh, like, can it really get any worse? Like I've said for years, like I'm a wuss. I could never go as low as that guy's going. I would have bailed a long time ago. And the idea here is, like you talked about, the pride and the ego that makes us wear this badge on our chest that says never give up.
That's right.
And the never give up is a man-made philosophy, not a God-ordained philosophy. It's never give up in God, not yourself, And that idea here of us surrendering. So we talk, about the idea of, if I'm on the battle line and I'm out of my last bullet, I don't have any more bullets left. And I have to make a decision at that point. Do I surrender to what I think is the enemy, or do I just fight with rocks and sticks or whatever else I can find? And I make the decision based off, well, what do I think my outcome's going to be? If I think that the enemy could possibly not be the enemy and maybe give me something, food, water, clothing, take me out of the desert, whatever, I might start to consider surrendering. But if I think the enemy is going to slit my throat as soon as I put my white flag up, there's no way in hell I'm surrendering.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way I'm going to go ahead and fight to the bitter end. And that's how we treat God sometimes. Like he's the enemy from us getting what we want.
Mm.
And instead surrendering because he's actually got something so much better for you. And that is so hard because we are taught from day one, never give up. And I think we've just misplaced that. And you cover that in your, God gave you this jet fuel of ambition and of smarts, and of creativity to build businesses. And you just kept hiding behind those. And my story, very similar, and Kyle's the same, and every man we run into, and how we hide behind and we don't know how to surrender to the one entity that is going to save us, and that's God. And so what a powerful story there.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Merrill. We've been taught never give up, but if I could just add to that, listen, every man listening, keep that motto. It's a good motto, but let me add to it so that you have God's truth in it. Never give up to man. Always give up to God. Never give up to man, always give up to God. So fear no man, but fear God, right? And this is a distinction here because what you just spoke about, Merrill, is surrender, the meaning of surrender, the definition of surrender in the physical realm, right? In the physical realm. What I'm talking about entirely is surrender in the spiritual realm. Realm. And that's the difference, right? So yes, you should fight for your wife, fight for your kids, fight for your faith, right? In the physical world. Absolutely. But in the spiritual world, don't ever fight against God. It's futile. He's God. You're not. He's infinite. You're finite. You're a crumb. You're a speck, right? And we need to realize this. So your power in the spiritual realm, well, I should say your power in the physical realm is from your willingness to fight. But your power in the spiritual realm is comes from your willingness to surrender. The faster you could surrender, the more you could surrender the different areas of your life, the more God's strength comes in and takes over. And then you have miracles happening, and your life becomes a contradiction to the world, and it demands an explanation. And people are like, how are you still at peace when this is happening, and this storm is happening, and this storm is happening? How do you have that? This was the apostles. They had this. They learned to understand spiritual surrender and harness its power and then chase it and pursue it. And they're like, man, the faster I could surrender the challenges of life, the more God's power comes through my life. And I become a spiritual reservoir to others. Not only am I well fed and nourished by God, by his life-giving water constantly, because I'm filled to the brim, but now I have overflow into my wife, into my children, into my business, into God's purpose and calling on my life. So Kyle, back to your earlier question, this is the life and place I'm now in. And it's fantastic. And we got to tell the world about it. Because I think there's a lot of dysfunctional understanding around what true masculinity looks like in the spiritual realm. And it's completely different than true masculinity in the physical realm.
Yep. And I think that's a great place, to think about, because I think this world continues to tell men that they have to change and look different and act different. And we see men do this every day, right? Men are changing the way in which that they define the word masculinity. And then once we get to this place where society tells us we need to change to, it's not fulfilling. And then the flip side of that, which, we've been speaking on, this idea that God is calling us to change. And then we look at that and say, well, society's telling us the same thing. So what's the difference? And the difference is God is actually giving us a roadmap to that change, because society's changed, in 5 years from now, when they tell a man to change and look different, it's going to look different than it does today, where God is telling us and calling us to look different and act different and treat people different. And that roadmap that he's giving us, the Bible, is the same through and through. It hasn't changed, nor will it change. And it just goes to that idea that that when we put our faith in society versus faith in man, in God, like men, just like you were saying before, this idea that men are going to continue to fail us and society is going to continue to fail us. And I said, this idea of God, he's not going to fail us. He's giving us the way. He's shown us the way. He lived on this earth as a man, and and he conquered death. So I think that's a great point, just, because men could hear what we're talking about and think, golly, something else wants me to change, wants me to look different, because society does this every day to us. But God, and I think that but God obviously is the underlining in why we exist as men, to try and change. But the change that we're being called to is so clearly defined. There is no up in the air. There is no what's that change going to look like in 5 years? It's clearly defined for us.
I agree with you, Kyle, and I think the Bible is very clear on the kind of change God is asking for. And he's not asking for you as a man to change who you are. He's asking for you as a man to change your heart and change your life, right? And that's completely different. And he's going to create that change. So he wants you to be who you are. God is using all the skill set from my past that I use for my own self-glory, that I'm now using for his glory. God's using all that, the who I am part, my identity part. He didn't ask me to change and become someone different. He's just like, son, I want you to surrender all those talents, gifts, and abilities I gave you. Surrender it to me. Give me permission to take over, and then believe I actually will. So for any man listening, if you want a 1, 2, 3 strategy, because you're a business guy, you're like, just giving me the 3 steps, Joseph. I'll do it. I'm a badass. You know how much money I make? You know how important I am, Joseph? Give me the blueprint. All right, here's your blueprint. 3 steps. Surrender. That means you have to first admit you're not God. He is. Your life's not working. Maybe some parts are, but not all. There's one area you can identify right now in your mind that is clearly not working, or could be working a whole lot better. Okay? So that's the first thing. Admit it's not working. All right? And then what do you do with that? Well, surrender that area. Whatever area you could look at in your life, your finances, your family, your faith, your business, whatever it is, surrender it to God. Surrender the addiction, whatever it is. Step 2 is to give God permission to come in and take over. That means relinquish your control, you little control freaks like me. We all are, if we, at the end of the day, right? It makes us very successful in business. All right, so you got to relinquish control. Remember, God is the ultimate gentleman. He waits, knocks on the door of your heart and waits like a gentleman to be invited in. He doesn't kick in the door, even though he could just make the door just disappear. He doesn't. He's the ultimate gentleman. Remember this. He waits for you to invite him in, so you must give him permission. And I know that sounds counterintuitive. He's God. Why does he need my permission? Why do I need to say it? Because he loves you, and he's your father, and he gave you free will, and he wants you to choose him. So you got to actually do it with your lips and say, God, you take over now. All right, so step 1, surrender. Step 2, permission. Give God permission to come in and take the thing that is crushing you in your life. And then step 3, believe he actually will. Believe as if it's already happened. And don't steal it back, because he didn't move at your speed, right? Wait patiently on the Lord. Be brave and courageous. Yes, you little control freak. Wait patiently on the Lord. That's the Bible verse for alpha control freak businessmen. And we hate it. Well, what do I do while I'm waiting on God? Well, God says, be brave and courageous. Because it takes bravery. It takes courage to give God control and then wait on him to do something bigger and better than you ever could. See, this is the secret formula. 1, 2, 3. So as a quick recap, surrender, give permission, and then believe, and just wait on him and watch what he does.
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
And I love it. Oh, that's super, super helpful. So here I am, I'm visioning now, Peter. Peter gets out of the boat and he takes his first few steps, and then he falls through the water. And that is where we get stuck with the belief thing, right? Like, so I got you on number one, I got you on number two, but number three is the perpetual struggle of me trying to remove God off the throne and put me back on. I don't know if God's going to be able to do this, right? And so this is the ongoing battle. One of the things that I don't know that it's a pushback on you, but like I think Kyle and I were joking the other day. It's like when I was young, I wanted to get fit. I wanted to get strong and fit one time, and it would just maintain itself for the rest of my life. Okay, so like,
great.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
I want that pill. Give it to me.
Yes, I want that. And we try to think of that with faith. And the idea here is my human nature does not go to sleep on me. It continues to creep back in, my pride and my ego. And it's just where Peter is. Like, yeah, I got my eyes on you. Nope, I took my eyes off and I put it on me. And it's that belief thing that you touch on there that is just such part of our ongoing walk. And our belief and our faith, right, can get stronger and stronger through practice of surrender and permission.
That is exactly it. Yeah.
It's not a one and done.
It's definitely not a one and done. And it's to your point, Merrill. It's like hitting the gym the first time and you haven't been there in 10 years or you've never been there. It's going to hurt at first. Okay.
Yeah.
You're going to have some tearing. You're going to have some friction, but growth does not happen unless friction exists. So you need friction. Friction is that fuel to growth, right? But the more you practice, the more you show up and go through the suck, and then the next day, suck a little less. The next day, suck a little less. The next day, suck a little less. It's the same thing in your spiritual walk, right? For all you successful business owners, you know what that's like to build a startup company. It sucks year 1, 2, and 3 up to year 5 before the cash flow and everything starts to, get momentum and it starts to work. And then you can automate stuff, right? You can automate in so much of a way your spiritual life in that it gets so much easier and almost effortless. See, the more I've practiced surrendering to God and then stealing back control and then watching things crash again, I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop just touching the wheel because this is dumb.
Right.
This is dumb at this point, right? And eventually I'm going to learn, don't touch the hot stove. All right. I'm not stealing back from God. So I started to get really good at surrender and not taking it back, okay? And then permission, giving God permission to come in and realize he's God, I'm not, and I have to get humble, okay? And giving him permission. Well, man, when I started doing that and then he started coming in and doing things without me even touching, and he started clearing up areas of my life that I'd been struggling with for years, and I didn't have to go in and actually actively do it, whoa. That was amazing. Now I want more of that stuff, right? Yeah. That's like miracles, man. That's awesome stuff. All right. And then step 3, which you said, Merrill, belief, right? Waiting on God's timing. See, it's all about aligning with God's will, which is step 1 and 2, surrender and permission. You align with God's will. And then you got to wait on God's timing. Both must be married, right? And waiting on God's timing is that third step, the believing, right? Expecting it as it's already happened, no matter how long it's going to take. God's moving, even though you're not. He's moving pieces and people into place, right? And processes for that increase in your life or in that area of your life. So the waiting on God, yeah, that one definitely took a while, for sure. But what I'm learning is this. It's starting to be easier, almost effortless. As an example, in my real life, God called me on my birthday, February 2nd, Groundhog's Day of this year, to purchase a radio station, a Christian radio station here in Tampa Bay, Florida, USA, which is one of the fastest growing cities in America right now. Well, that's kind of interesting, and I didn't want to do it because I had a lot more other things going on. And I'm like, God, I don't want to do this. How do I know this from you, right? And I clarified. I did my holy hours. I sat with him. And finally, I asked him, all right, God, if this is from you, let this specific thing happen in this meeting that I have with these people. And if it's not from you, then let this happen. All I want is your will, okay? I don't care about mine anymore. I just want yours because mine never works out anyway. Right? I just want yours, right? So I'm at that place. And then, boom, all of a sudden, clearly that answer came, right? Undeniable, what I had just prayed for. And I was like, okay, it's God's will. I'm going to do it. Then they asked for a large amount of money. And I'm like, God, my money's all in these other areas. What? And he's like, do it. Trust me. I'm like, I know nothing about running a terrestrial radio station. I know podcasting. I run, 2 very successful podcasts, but I don't know terrestrial. This hurts my head. This scares me. I don't feel success, like I'm going to have success in it. He goes, exactly, son. You're not going to do it. I am. I'm going to be glorified in it because you're completely unqualified. And I'm like, well, you're right about that. Okay, right? So here I am, and I think it's this week or the beginning of next week. I cut that check, and the attorneys and everything have finally agreed on everything, all the terms. And I acquired this radio station that reaches 500,000 people right here in the local area of Tampa Bay, right? And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. None. Zero. And I can say that with full authenticity. And I'm partially scared, just in my humanity. My humanity's scared because it's unknown, right? But man, I'm truly excited because this is God's project, God's plan, and God's money. So I don't know what's going to happen. And it's taken 6 months for us to finally lock in the contract. That was God's timing. Why wasn't it 30 days? I started to get impatient, and I was like, you know what, God, this is your project, man. Take it as long as you want. And I just relinquished that. So that's a real example of how God's about to do something really powerful in my life. And by the way, God's given me, the desires of my heart. I had this dream that I wanted to have my own live call-in radio show, like a Dave Ramsey, but instead of for finances, like blowing up rocks in men's heads, and hearts and families. And here I am about to step into it. That opportunity. This is how Dave Ramsey started, by owning a little piece of a radio landscape, real estate. God gave me the woman of my dreams after I was in a place of depression where I felt hopeless. I had a lot of girls in my life, but man, none of them was a girl I would ever marry. And I felt complete hopelessness that God had any girl for me ever. And I truly became resigned to the fact that I was probably going to die alone. And God moved after I surrendered that whole matter of dating and everything to him and the addiction. And he brought me the girl that's a godly daughter of his. And now we have 2 beautiful little humans that he's entrusted to me, a little boy and a little girl. And they're gorgeous and precious. And I get to be a dad. Right? God wants to fulfill all his biblical promises, not just in the world, brother, as you're listening, but in your life. Your life. And the only thing standing in the way is your rocks. The rocks in your head. The rocks around your heart. And I gave you the 1, 2, 3 formula to get rid of them.
Yeah. Excellent stuff. Well, Joseph, this has just been fantastic. And we thank you so much for joining us on Strong Dads, because there's not a guy out there listening today that can't relate to some, if not all, of what you're talking about. And just the ongoing battle of self, the curse, sometimes the curse of free will, right? it's the blessing and the curse, right? And so, but it's where love comes from. And the idea here of us now learning how to manage that and how to give that back to God. So I thank you so much for that. Hey, so as we start to wrap things up, you already beat me to the punch on give me your 1, 2, 3 for guys. So you jumped right through that. You were really good. You had your 1, 2, 3.
It's almost like you've done a podcaster before. I mean, I just it's kind of like you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, tell me, give us a little information on how people can listen to you, your shows, website, get some contact out there.
Yeah, so I run the #1 podcast on iTunes for Protestants and Catholics, called Broken Catholic, as you brought up, right? So we really seek to unify Christians everywhere. There's 120 million Protestants and Catholics in the United States of America. Imagine if we all stopped fighting each other and we actually pointed in the same direction and stopped making each other wrong just because we worship the same God a little differently. And we stopped. Imagine if we stopped acting like spoiled little children in the Father's house, arguing over who Daddy loves more. See, the enemy's got us divided. That's why he's winning. He's outside the Father's house, stealing territory from our children and our children's children. You see the evil spreading, the darkness spreading. It's because we're fighting each other. when we're called to surrender to God so that he makes us powerful, and then lock arms, Protestants and Catholics, together and go out and destroy the enemy and his evildoers. Imagine if 120 million of us point in the same direction, gentlemen. The economic influence, the spiritual influence, the businesses we own, the money we have access to, the influence. We'll shift laws in America overnight. So that's what I do in the podcast. You go to brokencatholic.com. Sorry, that was a rant. But in my day-to-day life, God's called me very specifically. He said, Joseph, bring my sons back to me so that I can fill them with my love, my forgiveness, my transformation. I want to blow up the rocks in their lives from their childhood wounds and everything that only I can do as their father, right? So bring them back to me. Teach them what I taught you. I'm like, okay, Dad, let's go. Right? So this is what I do. And my coaching is called Blow Up Rocks. So if you're a man that resonated with some part of this and the Holy Spirit convicted you today, not condemned you, condemnation's from the enemy, conviction is from heaven, and you feel convicted and encouraged, and you're like, enough. I need to and I want to do something about this. These rocks in my life and my family. Well, then I could definitely help you. Go to blowuprocks.com, and we're going to clear out those rocks that you just have not been able to do on your own. And I'm going to give your audience a free gift. I wrote a book called Peace and Purpose, 7 Steps for Mastering Anger and Stress. Who doesn't want this as a man? Come on, stop yelling at your wives and kids. You want to know how? It's in the book. I'm going to give you the book. All right, go to freepurposebook.com, freepurposebook.com. I'm going to give you the book absolutely free. It's easy to read for men because we got short attention spans. It's a one-sitting type of book. All right, Kyle, you can read it out there, on the fire engine, hopefully, as long as you're not the guy driving, right? And I'm going to give it to you. It's totally free. You cover the shipping, I'll cover the book. That's the deal. You got to put in a little skin in your own healing and recovery. So I'm putting skin into your life if you want it. Go to freepurposebook.com, blowuprocks.com if you're interested in the coaching work that I do and you want the miracles in your life that all these men are getting in their lives, including my own story. I just shared my personal story. But man, I get to work with guys that their lives got completely shifted when they actually let God in. And I gave them the tools to do so. So if you want an actual miracle, like a modern day miracle in your life, real answers to real prayers, man, we'll show you how to do that.
All right. Great stuff. Great stuff. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. And so any of you guys out there listening, please go on and get the freepurposebook.com. Get that book. I mean, I can't wait to get my hands on that because I have not seen that yet. And also just blowuprocks.com. I like that idea. I think our name of our ministry is Rock Solid Families. And we talk about that from the idea of, building yourself on the rock. All right.
That's right.
But
I just got to jump in on that. Yeah. So we got to blow out all the false rocks in our life that become idols. There's only one rock that remains after you do you work with me in the coaching, and that is the rock of Jesus. And that's the foundation your life is now built upon. But all the false rocks, God's going to blast out of your life. Those are the crushing rocks. God's rock is the foundation rock, the one you stand upon. It doesn't crush you. You stand on it.
Yeah, great stuff. All right, Kyle, you want to sign us out, brother?
Absolutely. Thanks so much again for Kramer's Beer House, Casey Outdoor Solutions. Really do appreciate them. Joseph, Dan, thanks so much for coming on our show. Really do appreciate you and what you're doing out there. And it's awesome to know other guys are going after men. And we're trying to, collectively as a group of men trying to figure this whole thing out together. So thanks so much for what you're doing out there. And hope you guys are out there having a good week. Go out there and be some strong dads. Hey, this is Kyle Crawford from Strong Dads. Strong Dads podcast would love to thank the Kramer's Beer House for coming alongside of us. The Crimer's Beer House was started in 1982 by the Crimer family, and since that time, they have definitely become a Cincinnati favorite. So if you're looking for an incredible meal in an incredible setting, definitely go down to Route 128 and check out the Crimer's Beer House.